all benefit of doubt with the public.
Yes, sir.
So where these things should be handled as a case by case situation, a person by person, cop by cop, record by record situation, a lot of this stuff is going to get blanketed because of the way that this has been done so long, and it didn't get addressed for so long. Hell, it still hasn't been addressed. It still hasn't. So, if you had a situation where, when was Trayvon Martin? 2014?
No, that wasn't even 2014. That was like 2008, 2000. That was what,
Okay.
early Obama or
Okay.
2009, somewhere around there.
So you go back to like times before that, and that was a different situation that didn't involve cops. But what I'm saying is, like, when you get to those Eric Garners, those Tamir Rices and stuff like that, had there been any effort at all to address how these situations are approached, to address any of these other things, like, you would at least have put some goodwill in the bank that you were trying and that you had something going on and that you had looked at this. And if a couple of those cops who had violated that had gone to jail over this amount of time, you would have that goodwill in the bank to where people might be able to look at things on a case by case basis. But you didn't do any of that. None of it. The only thing that got done in that amount of time is that Obama was able to push through a thing with the body cams. And even
You're right,
and that
and
was
that's
that was a knockdown, drag out thing. The police union the police unions now will not support any Democratic candidate because of that. and they view Democrats as anti-police just because of the body cams. So you set up a situation where the public, they're not going to give you that olive branch. They're not going to give you that, because I think if I would have been in the situation of that cop, I don't think I'd have killed her.
yeah.
But I don't know how that would have ended. And that, if nothing else, should be looked at differently than we look at some of these other situations, and it won't, because there is no goodwill in that bank.
Yes, sir. And I think that need to be where we attack at today. I stand corrected. I look up Trayvon Martin. It was 12, but it feels like But even with that, that's 9 years ago.
Yeah,
From the
9 years
true,
ago.
I wouldn't even say the true start of all this shit, but the current movement that's going on. That's really where it started, was back then. It's just, dude.
But
I
yeah,
mean, shoot. As I said, I think that's our best angle on attacking today is, just kind of speaking on, because granted, that situation, but did you hear about also the young kid, the young boy who had the gun in the alley and then got shot
yeah.
with his hands
Oh yeah,
up?
I definitely want to touch on that.
So
And
you're
when we
blurring a
talk,
lot of fucking lines here. You know what I'm
well, here's the
saying?
problem. Yeah, well, here's the problem with that one. That one has a lot less blurred line than any of these other ones that we're talking about, because that kid surrendered.
He did surrender. But
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing. That goes back to the, it's like, and I hate to be the motherfucker to say this, but in a lot of ways, you got a group of motherfuckers who shit just happened.
Mm-hmm.
Shit happens, and it's because I was profiled, and shit just happened. Now, and that's our fight. Shit happens, and we're trying to stop shit from happening. But then you have another fucking side of the fucking branch where you got motherfuckers who were actually doing shit, and then
Mm-hmm.
shit happens.
Yeah, but here's the thing. And here's why that shit don't matter. Because you go to prison, if you are in Afghanistan and somebody fucking fighting for fucking Taliban or ISIS, shooting at y'all, straight up shooting at y'all, and then he throws his weapon away and puts both hands up like this, and you shoot him, you go to prison. That's in war. I mean, I don't know if we declared war against Hispanic kids in Chicago lately, but even if we did, you still got rules. And I think a general rule has to be, regardless of what you've done, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of the heat of the moment, if somebody fucking surrenders, both hands up, that's it.
And
You
I
take
tell you
him
what I was
down,
looking at today.
you arrest him,
Fucking
you don't kill him.
the dude in Colorado who fucking went in a store and killed 10 people. Now let's do a
Yeah.
quick compare contrast, you know, just a quick one.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking they shot him in the fucking leg. So how is it y'all got tactical motherfuckers coming in, all type of shit, and y'all managed to not kill this asshole who
I'll go one
actually killed
further.
motherfucker?
Yeah, I'll go one farther. Think of the last time, and because it's been a while, I'm gonna have to Google it and look it up. Think of the last time that a mass murderer was killed by police. They're not. They either kill themselves or they
You
are
feel me?
captured. Yeah. They
And
either
that's the
kill
goddamn
themselves
truth,
or
man.
they are captured. And I don't know if you saw that video of speaking of Colorado. I don't know if you saw the video of the old lady.
Mm-mm. Oh, the
Oh my.
73-year-old one? Mm-mm. I
Yeah.
wasn't able to look that one up.
Yeah.
Horrendous.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I mean, she was a white woman. She's 73 years old. She's 80 pounds, 5 feet tall. She has dementia. She was in Walmart and she was walking out with her stuff she forgot to pay. They confronted her on it. They didn't know she had dementia either. They confronted her on it. She put the stuff down. She offered to pay. They told her no. And then she started walking home. Apparently, cop comes up. What happened? They tell him. And then they're like, yeah, she's walking down the street there. Cop rolls up on her. He's like, hey, you want to talk to me about what happened at Walmart? And she's like, and she's just standing at him. You can see she's not right. She's staring there. She's staring at him, smiling. And then she turns to walk away. And he's like, oh, no, you're not. And he grabs her and he puts her in that arm bar. He takes her down hard. Of course, she's trying to get up. So now he's like dominating her. The car pulls up. Another cop comes up. They slam her on the car hood, and the whole time she's just, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. And, and he is all, and you can hear him on the cam going, yeah, we not going to play this game today. And has her all twisted up, dislocated her arm, roughed her up, arrested her. Turns out, 73-year-old dementia patient.
Yeah.
Because again, you're trained to hammer and everything looks like nails.
Yeah. And dude, I mean, as I say, for me, it's just like, how the fuck can you prevent a lot of these situations? I'm more of a fucking cautious, let me prevent some stupid shit before the stupid shit happen, so we don't end up in a bigger pile of shit. But even with this is what I'm saying, it's getting difficult because you continuously have these situations that occur where people are actually committing stupid ass crimes. And then you'll have somebody who panicking and, oh, cops, we need the cops. Like the guy who freaking got roughed up, we talked about last week, who got roughed up in North Carolina when they beat him up trying to arrest him. You know what I'm saying? It's not that the situation why he was called was being wrong, but is it the training where we prevent this? Is it the mental health help that we are able to give people within the community prior to these situations occurring?
I mean,
what's the preventive factors that we can actually use?
I got a couple of ideas, to be honest with you. I mean, number one, we as an entire nation have to look at mental health as the epidemic that it is, and and begin to actually throw money at the problem, because we haven't done it. We've been defunding mental health services since the 1960s. And there's almost nothing going on with it right now. And it's a bigger problem than it's ever been before. Our population is bigger. We don't treat the problem. We throw medications that are caustic and painful to people as a way of dealing with the problem. We don't help them. So that's number one. It's setting up a circumstance where you're going to need the cops later. So that's number one for preventative. The second thing that needs to be done is a complete overhaul of how these situations are approached in training. De-escalation, violence as a last resort situations. Like, it's got to be a thing where there's full accountability. We have 3 branches of government that keeps anyone from getting out of control, but that only works at the federal level. Why doesn't it work at the state level? Why doesn't it work at the local level? There needs to be that kind of circle of accountability where the police operate the exact same way as the Justice Department does as a part of the executive branch. And the executive branch is accountable to the legislative branch, which is accountable to the judicial branch. That doesn't operate on the local level. That should be done. If there's real oversight over what these guys do, how they train, where the money goes, how they're doing these things, how the things are investigated when something goes wrong, with real oversight where somebody's able to see it and it's on display for the world, that stops a lot of this shit. Third thing, you got to kill qualified immunity and allow, not only do these, allow these things to where it can be litigated, because if you didn't do anything wrong, we're going to find out in litigation during discovery that you didn't do anything wrong. Okay. And if you allow somebody to sue for those things, it can't be the state that pays. Right now, whenever somebody sues, like the $27 million that Floyd's family got, the however many millions that Breonna Taylor's family got, they got them from the state. So you pay that. The taxpayer pays that. Like, no, these need to come out of police funds. They need to come out of police pensions. Police, matter of fact, need to be paid better, and they need to pay money into an insurance firm the same way doctors do for malpractice, so that it is their money that's going up on the line when they do these things. I guarantee you, if it is your money on the line, I'm gonna see a lot less brutalizing on the streets.
I definitely agree. Now, so I do have another question that you kind of sparked with that. Personally, how do you feel like we could protect, because it's not every cop. And I saw a couple posts this week, on online, a couple people, bashing cops and making it just a super race issue. And when it's definitely not. We've already know, we look at the facts in a lot of cases. We know it's not, just a super race issue. It's more of a minority communities are the ones that are being policed at a higher rate. But how can we, at this point protect our cops who are not the ones, committing these acts and things of that nature?
All the stuff I just said doesn't hurt a single cop that doesn't do anything wrong. You gotta tighten up the circle of accountability. There's got to be an accountability to bring the bad cops to the level of the good cops or squeeze them out. The good cops have nothing to worry about at all. I have a boss that I have to answer to if the numbers don't add up right for what I do. And I never have to answer to that man. Why? Because I don't do anything wrong. It's that simple. So I think the best way to protect the cops is to put in a situation where they are not surrounded by bad cops. I think that helps. I think that helps the good cops. I think it helps to bring the rest of the department up to the level of the performance that those particular officers have. I think that helps with their goodwill in the community. I think that you need to offer these people incentives that will, A, keep them from doing stuff like this, and B, incentivize them to live where they are going to be policing. They need to be a part of their communities. They need to be a part of what's going on where they are. They need to know some of the people in the neighborhood. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. If you had a cop that lived in your neighborhood and patrolled your neighborhood, the neighborhood kids are a hell of a lot less likely to spit at him or throw stuff at his car.
Yeah.
It's when some damn stranger from out their damn neighborhood who don't even live in their damn city, who doesn't know anything about their life experiences, shows up with panicky ass training, an itchy trigger finger, and no idea what the hell's going on, treating them like nails and they're the hammer.
So really, on that extent, we should see a lot more police departments actually being active and going in communities and recruiting, especially at the high school level, a lot of these kids to actually, work their way into law enforcement and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I think, that would be the changing factor that, would help in that instance.
Yeah, if you made it a thing where a person would be able to, where policing, number one, could be respected, number two, be financially beneficial, Number three, be sold as a method of helping to raise the standards and raise everything that's going on in your community, not policing your community, not, being the thing that comes in and takes care of the problem in the community, but as a part of lifting the community up. Like there is no, like, you just don't see it. Every now and again we'll see a Facebook video where there's a cop who stops at the kids are playing basketball on the street and the cop shows up, plays basketball. Why does everybody smile when they see that video? It's because it's so damn rare. Like there needs to be more of that.
That's exactly the type of interaction we should be seeing with officers, especially in minority communities above all, because the stigma's already been there, that it's cops against us, when 9 times out of 10, it's definitely, I can't speak for everyone, but 9 times out of 10 cops that I know of do the job because they want to help, out in the community. They want to help create change and things of that nature. And, I totally think you're right with, the biggest issue across the board with injustice when it comes to police brutality is we need to weed out a lot of the officers who are not getting the proper training, who don't have the mindset to actually do this job the way it needs to be done.
Like we have to understand that we are choosing from among the population to police the population, and how serious that is. It's kind of like how people don't actually understand that when you get a driver's license, you are committing to getting inside of a 4,000-pound piece of metal and hurling it down the street at 70 miles an hour, and that you're not going to kill anybody. It's a much bigger responsibility than people think it is. And when you're going to choose from among your population to police your population, again, you're choosing from among your population. If we look around, we're going to see a bunch of fucking people who I would not trust with my PlayStation controller, much less with a badge and a gun. So, we have to look at that. And again, if you are giving it if you are giving the job the respect that it deserves, if you are given the job, like, I make the amount, like I looked it up, the average salaries of a police officer in the state of Texas. On the low end, I make the amount of 2 of them. My salary is the amount of exactly 2 of them. That's madness. I manage a restaurant. That's ridiculous. It is that simple. I make the amount, I make the salary of a police detective, a veteran detective, a guy who went to school, a guy with a criminal justice degree, a guy with life and death in his hands every single day. And he makes what a restaurant manager makes. So we can probably start there. So you can actually get the kind of people that you need. You can attract the kind of people that you want. You can screen out the ones that you don't need. You can help people in their communities. You can give them tax breaks to live in those communities so that they don't leave home and they're a part of their community and things like that. And you can start to actually see change in how they're doing their job and how the neighborhood and how the population receives them, and how and you'll just start to see these incidents drop.
And now this is for me, this is my huge fear, and the thing that I want to prevent more than anything with the work we're doing currently with minority communities is I don't want it to get to a point, because it seems like we're really treading that gray line currently, where you have kids within the communities who don't respect these cops at all, especially with the current climate and things that are going on. You're going to have more instances, I feel, that we've been seeing, occur over the past 2 weeks, because you're only going to have more kids rebel against, law enforcement, because, that's what they're currently being taught on social media.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is, again, as every problem goes, I likened this issue to a check engine light in the car before. And the longer it goes before we start addressing the problem, the more work that's going to need to be done in order to get over the problem. We got to start somewhere. There's going to be an entire generation of kids that there's nothing that can be done to garner that respect. That's how it is. But that doesn't mean that the work should not be done. Because just like any other problem, you're going to need to invest in it. You're going to need to invest money. You're going to need to invest time. And if they're willing to invest money and time, yes, you're going to have a generation of kids who, you're going to be able to affect some. You're not going to be able to affect all. But if you affect some, number one, you've already made some progress. Number two, as the generations go and as time passes, consistency will out. It will always win. So if you're consistent about it and you're doing it and they're doing the right thing and that right thing becomes a culture, then that culture will begin to bleed into the community. The culture of us versus them also bleeds into the community. So if bad can bleed in, so can good.
Yes, sir. So I mean, that's more so where we'll put our push, I know, as an organization, and continuing to try to be, the middle ground of everything that's going on currently, and continuing to keep I said, a true perspective on everything that's going on, beyond the hype and beyond the speculation that people are just spewing out on social media. The instant something happens, people just jump out and, oh, we point the finger, very, very quickly without trying to, actually make the work and the effort to fix these situations before they occur.
Yeah.
So, as we spoke on, I know last week we touched a little bit on it, but I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into it today with the whole mental health side of it. It's like, the instance, you spoke on with the young lady in Colorado who had dementia. We're speaking on George Floyd, who supposedly may have been under the influence of drugs that day, which we all know that could be a catalyst into more mental health issues. I'm pretty sure, down the board, with a lot of these situations that have occurred over the past few years, there has been a ton of situations that could have been prevented if, as we push, don't defund the police, but let's fund more social service help within these communities, and let's get into these communities and honestly build them up to where we are not having these issues ahead of time. With the mental health side of it, Mark, how could what's our best preventive measures that we can implement on that side, as far as funding, either taking some of the funding away from police departments where they're going and buying military gear, and being able to actually include some social service helps with it?
Yeah. So we have to understand that most problems that we're dealing with today, we're now, more than 2 decades into the 21st century. We are dealing with problems that have all grown pervasive, and they bleed into one another. So do we need military vehicles and equipment for the police? Well, the reason that we need military vehicles and equipment for the police is to deal with giant crowds that are stirred up in a state of unrest. The giant crowd that is stirred up in a state of unrest is there because of an injustice that's been done and not addressed. The injustice was done and not addressed because training wasn't taken care of and properly funded, and people weren't properly screened. People weren't properly screened because they didn't put the funding into that. And then the funding didn't go into that because they were using something else that they took from mental health. And it goes on in a circle. So what we have to do is we have to pick a point where we're going to break the chain. And mental health is the perfect place to break the chain because it may be the most pervasive issue in the United States today. When you look not just at some of the incidents that lead to these bad encounters with police, but look at homelessness in America. When you look at the explosion of homelessness in America, I know they just did, a thing in LA County where they're going to be banning the encampments. And, so now the city has to do something with all these people because they did nothing for the situation, and it exploded. And you would have entire parks that are nothing but tents. I mean, where I live right now in Austin, Texas, about 200 yards to my right is a homeless encampment. And I live in a very nice neighborhood, but I'm literally a couple hundred yards away from a homeless encampment. And there is not a freeway overpass that I can find in this city that does not have at least 8 to 10 tents living, under it. And the overwhelming majority of those people are not lazy. They're not, unwilling to work, or, drug addicts. A lot of them are mental health. And some of the ones that are drug addicts are self-medicating because of how devastating some of the drugs that are being pushed onto those people are to them. And maybe alcohol is an easier way to calm them down without the side effects, where they can actually eat food, or where they can actually, have a lucid conversation with somebody. So it's such a pervasive issue, and it infects so much of our society and sends it into a bad direction. And the more we turn a blind eye, the more we ignore it, the more, it's going to continue to fuel some of these bad encounters. And, it's funny that mental health is really only brought up by our government as a reason, as a stopgap reason why someone goes on a mass shooting, and therefore we shouldn't do anything about the weapons, is because, well, we got to do something about mental health, because it's a catch-all phrase. It's become a political punchline. And that's the biggest problem. It is an epidemic that it may be on level with COVID as far as its effect on society as a whole, but it's basically, again, a political punchline with no teeth behind it on how we're going to actually attack the problem. And if you look at how we attack certain things when we need them, right? A plane crashes, we ground all the planes. 6 people got a blood clot, we pulled the entire Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Somebody, attacks us and kills a couple of soldiers, we'll go to war as a nation. But we don't take that same kind of all in, this is unacceptable approach to the smaller things that seem small and seem like someone else's problem, but it really affects every single one of us. So I think if we really want to break the chain on on how this whole thing goes along, when it comes to policing and it comes to, all the different things that we're seeing here, we got to start someplace. And I don't think there's a better place to start than mental health.
Yes, sir. And I definitely agree with you on that. And I think, that would be one of the most preemptive measures we could take to addressing a lot of these issues that we're dealing with. As you said, even with gun violence, I know that the Biden administration is pushing through. This past week, they passed a bit of legislation towards that, and they're pushing more legislation getting through Congress. That's one of the main things they have on the table right now. But what's the old saying? Guns don't kill people, people do, or something of the nature. So I don't think, no matter how much gun legislation you put in place, you don't totally stop any of these problems. You can still have a person who has a bad day, and that just so happened to be the day that they break, and they were legal enough to, get their gun prior to, they didn't have any convictions, anything, so I don't think, the gun legislation is just where these issues end, especially when we're talking about mass shootings and things of that nature, because I believe the past, 3-4 mass shootings were all legal purchase firearms as far as that goes.
Yes.
So, I mean, and granted, it could have been harder for them to purchase them, but it's still not like they didn't have no avenue entirely to go through to get them.
Yeah, I mean, there are three points that I would say that are kind of hard to get around. Number one of those mass shooters should have been on a red flag list, because the state of Indiana tells you that if you feel that someone is a mental health danger, that you can apply to have that person red flagged, and they will not be able to purchase a weapon. And what happened was, this person, his mom actually, turned it, sent it up, and a judge didn't think there was enough evidence, and she had said that he would hurt somebody, and they did not grant it, and he went out and bought an assault rifle, and then he went with where he went. That was problem number one. Problem number two, mental health. The thing is that you still, yes, it may not stop all these mass shootings, but the thing of the matter is, like I said, if I crashed a plane people would stop and say, okay, why did that plane crash? If another one crashed, all the planes land. You have to at least be able to take a pause and make legitimate attacks on things to see what is it that's making this happen. And if it is mental health, then you have to be able to make that pause and freeze what you need to freeze. Since we haven't taken care of the other problem, you have to pick a problem and take care of it. If you're unwilling to take care of the mental health problem, then you better take care of the gun problem. If you're not going to take care of the gun problem, you better take care of the mental health problem. And then the last thing, it's a bit of satire, but it's a very disturbing view into how we think as a country. Every time there's been a mass shooting, I didn't find this out until today. There's a satire paper, The Onion, or I guess they're a magazine, but they put out a picture of the mass shooting, a picture of the crime scene, and it says, this could not be prevented, says the only country where it happens. So at some point, we got to look in the mirror as a nation. If this isn't happening anywhere else and it's happening here, we can no longer continue to say that there's nothing we could do. It was going to happen anyway. Well, it's this reason or it's that reason. It isn't happening anywhere else. It doesn't happen in places that are torn apart by civil war. It is not happening in places where their gun legislation is as free and loose as ours, even looser. It's not happening anywhere. It's not happening in places that we think of as dangerous. It's places we think of that we would never go as Americans. We wouldn't think about walking up and down the streets of Iraq. This doesn't happen there. We wouldn't walk up down the streets of Afghanistan or or any place else that we think of as dangerous. And these things don't happen there. And we have to hold ourselves accountable to that. And what are we accountable to? We're accountable to one another. So, like I said, do we want to deal with the guns or do we want to deal with the mental health? Because we got to pick one and stop talking about both.
Yes, sir. And I believe even more so as a country, as you said, we are supposed to be the leaders to the rest of the world. And a lot of things that our legislation that we put forth, policies that we put forth, are normally adopted by other nations after they see that it has worked for us. So especially when we're talking about issues in like Nigeria that we were talking about last year. I know Libya was having a couple issues nationally there. I believe that us being the leader of the world, that especially with the police injustice and things that are going on here, we need to definitely put a closer eye on that. And as I said, with them pushing legislation for gun control right now, as you said, if that's what they're going to do, they need to attack it and get it done. But seeing how that's a battle that we'll be looking 3 years before we'll have a conclusion with the doing, let's attack something that we can handle right now, which is putting policy in place to prevent with. Let's send some funding back to social care services to get out there and make a difference on the mental health side of things, which, as you said, I think that's one of the most immediate things that we can attack within communities across the board, not only minority communities, to make a huge difference with a lot of these issues we're seeing causing unrest going around the country. One thing I did wanted to wrap back around to was the situation there in Ohio with teenage girls kind of fighting there. The cop was kind of called out. We're not sure on all the facts towards that case quite yet. All we know what we've each seen from the body cam video there. Kind of on that feel for you, Mark, as I said, prior to starting the day, my issue is I put it up last week. When I did do the podcast, I posted the podcast on the page and I put out a question. I said, how do we want to be policed? People have to realize we have to stop calling the cops unless there are serious crimes being committed. Now, in the situation in Ohio, I'm kind of stumped on with my question because was there a crime being committed? Kind of. Was it right for a cop to be present in that situation? Yes. Now, the issue lies with, why was there not backup? the cop's training. From the video, we see, the cop from the moment, he pulled his gun out of his holster. I believe it was less than a 2 minute, if even 3 minutes, reaction of him actually using his weapon instead of de-escalating the situation. But even in that instance, how can we prevent these measures ourselves from putting ourselves in these situations, where now a young girl, has lost her life at such a young age of 16, to the point she'll never get to experience, other things in life, as far as even a career field and working in her career field and seeing what her life could have been. How is that something that could have been prevented earlier on?
So the first thing we need to look at is the fact that we have to separate all situations like this. There is a tremendous amount of pressure, and it's justifiable pressure. But by no means am I saying that it isn't justified, because of all the things that we've seen and all the things we've been through, as minorities, and what we've seen, over all these years. The police haven't done themselves any favors. They have not been granted any benefit of the doubt and goodwill by the community, because of all the things that we've seen and have transpired. There has to be, to a certain degree, a resistance to lump all situations together. We have to be able to look at every situation differently, and where, I watched the body cam footage several times, and actually the amount of time between, from him getting out of his vehicle to him actually firing the 4 shots was actually measured in seconds. It was actually, I think, a little less than 10 seconds. And it's a lot. It's a lot going on. You have people fighting. You have, the woman getting pushed down. You have a young man kicking a woman in the face. At the same time, in front of you, you have a young lady who has a knife in her hand. She's lunging, at the girl in pink. And, there's a lot of stuff going on. Now, obviously, again, hindsight, being 2020, we're thinking, there could have been different things that could have happened there. There could have even been emergency, even violent de-escalation techniques, whether, there's a warning shot, whether you shoot somebody that in a place that isn't center mass, an arm, a leg, the backside, something. There's all sorts of different things that we could look at, because someone's going to have to look at this. This officer is on administrative leave right now, as they tend to do after situations like this, and we'll see. But, to lump this in with some of the other things that we've seen is incorrect, because each one of these things has to be looked at differently. The situation with Deontay Wright is not the same as the situation with George Floyd. They can't be looked at the same. They are different cases. There are different people involved. There are different circumstances involved. Even though the overall premise, white officer on black male, in a macro sense, was the same, there are many micro bullet points that are going to be different. So I think it's very important that we look at that. Another thing that has to be looked at is the circumstances and our own responsibility in dealing with the situation. We know right now, based on all the things that we've seen and all the evidence that we have, that when you have a volatile situation going on in the streets, with all the stuff that's going on, and you call the police, that you are basically inviting a potentially explosive situation into a bad one. So if you have a bad situation going on and calling the police into the situation while a fight is going on, you're basically bringing in a barrel of gasoline laced with gunpowder, and lo and behold, it went off. These are the sort of things that we have to think about. When you call the police, and I don't know all the details, and there is some rumors that the young lady who was killed actually called the police. I don't know if that's true or not. If that is true, then you have to know, whether you're riled up, whatever the situation may be. If the police show up and you're wielding a knife in front of them, there's a really good chance something bad's gonna happen. Really bad's gonna happen. And then it's gonna be left up on everybody else to untangle all of this. In the meantime, a life is gone. So there's a responsibility on our part. We're fighting in the streets. We're attacking each other. We're jumping. A bunch of girls are going over to somebody's house to jump somebody. A girl's defending herself with a kitchen knife in the front yard in a neighborhood. There's so many things. There's a dude who's kicking a young lady in the face, and so brazenly that it's happening in front of a cop's body cam. Like all of these different things, right? There's a responsibility for all of us when it comes to dealing with these situations. And if we are going to hold police more accountable, if we're going to march in the streets, if we're going to demand legislation, we're going to demand policy, we're going to hold them accountable. We just got finished convicting, Derek Chauvin, and we have all these other things going on. That we also have an equally weighted responsibility in how we're dealing with one another, to not bring that element into the situation. Because whatever was going on between those young ladies, those girls don't go over there to jump her. She doesn't get the knife. The cops don't get called. She's still alive today. And that is a responsibility that we got to be able to spread around, and we got to be able to tell the truth about. And we're not going to be able to do that if we lump every single situation in and on itself. We have to look at every single situation and go, all right, what precipitated this? Okay, that's murder. All right, what precipitated this? Okay, this is a situation that got out of control. What precipitated this? This is a mental health issue, and the police lack the training to deal with it. We got to be able to pull these things apart so that we can hold the correct people accountable, because the police are never going to be able to build their will with the public if they don't address the issues in how they apply themselves, and how whether it's their training, it's definitely their training, but how it's applied, their circle of accountability, all those things. They will never be able to grow their goodwill with the community, gain the trust of the community in order to properly police the community, keep the community safe, and keep themselves safe while doing such a hard job if they don't attack that. We can never get over the hump if we don't stop the situations that precipitate them getting involved in the first place. And it goes back to some of the other stuff that we talk about, whether it's, being able to have access to mental health, being able to have access to the type of community organizations and community functions that keep kids out the street, and everything else that we're doing here. We've let a lot of things go, and we're paying the bills right now for letting those things go, both with the policing and with our own communities. And all these things got to be addressed.
Yes, sir. And one thing I kind of want to touch on before we wrap here today was how you kind of, brought up the sense of inter-community accountability. Two of the instances that have occurred in the past week, the one in North Carolina, and also as we're speaking on the situation in Ohio, either way it goes, these are both situations where it was minorities dealing with other minorities that caused a situation for law enforcement to be needed at the time. So I think there is a huge need for especially in the minority community, for people to start looking within the mirror and start asking, how can we, prevent these measures ourselves, where we're not calling the cops on one another, and then on the back end we're rioting in the streets because once we called that officer, now we saw somebody's life be took, and now we feel the need to protest and riot and loot and things of that nature. As you said, it's an accountability factor across the board. It's not just on one end. And the more we start to see accountability be took on the end, where now you have Chauvin, who's been presumed guilty on all counts. You have another case out of Minnesota also with Dante Wright, where there's a high chance that the officer in that case will be found guilty also. Now we're starting to see accountability from that end. Now, where do we show accountability for ourselves within the community in preventing these situations from occurring and preventing more minorities from losing their lives? Even on top of that, I believe there was a protest this weekend where there was over 100 people arrested during the protests, and you know they're not going to back down on their end, especially when they're starting to show accountability. They're only going to ask for it more from us in our situation. So even with the protests and things of that nature, we got to make sure that we're in line and we cross our T's and dot our I's on our end. Kind of closing out today, as we said last week, all we're trying to do is create a situation, an environment where we can bring more people in on the conversation and figure out more ways we can prevent, the loss of lives, and, even having cops, having to serve time, in prison for, bad decisions they made on their end. We're not an organization that's against, the cops. We're not against the cops, and we are for the people in our communities, but it takes a bit of both, and understanding from both ends to make this truly work and to truly see quality when we're talking about police brutality and systemic injustice in that field. Because our main thing here is it doesn't even end with police brutality. There are so many other issues that are plaguing us nationwide when it comes to inequality, whether it be financially, economically, living conditions, environmental conditions within these communities that are leading up to these issues. And as we said last week, we continuously focus on police kills minority, and now there's unrest and uproar when we should be focused on what can we do to prevent these measures from occurring in the beginning, period. So is with a heavy heart this week. I think me and Mark both, this one very tough conversation, especially when it's situations that we're not helping within our own communities to assist in not having, police come out and, kill anyone, especially with the loss of a teenager this week. That's very huge. That's not something to be taken lightly. That's a young lady who didn't even get to experience, a piece of her life. So, at some point we got to say, where do we nip this in the bud, and, where do we start really seeing the change and causing the change? Because the change didn't occur the other day when Chauvin was, convicted guilty, and, that shouldn't have been the ending of this movement or anything of that nature. It's a lot more work that needs to be done, even deeper than that. I would say that's a great start at the system showing accountability on their end. But, my huge push, and will be my push for, a while now, is in the minority community, we got to show accountability ourselves on every end. Start making the movement to fix these issues ourselves, whether anybody else helps us along or assist in these factors and these manners. We got to make the push to get guns out of our communities ourselves, stop the drug dealing within our communities ourselves, stop the illegal activity and the crime that is happening in our communities ourselves. And when we learn to police ourselves a bit better and find accountability for ourselves a bit better, I believe it helps on the end that we're asking from everyone else.
Yeah, I would say for my last word today is I would like to acknowledge a failure. And I would like for everyone who hears this to acknowledge a failure. Because what made a lot of these things happen and what made this organization even necessary is a failure, because we have been in many instances failed by a system that was not meant to help our community to grow. It was meant, wasn't meant to, kind of bring us together. It wasn't meant for the prosperity of all. It wasn't meant to hold up to the guidance that was written in our Constitution, in our Bill of Rights, and in each one of the amendments that followed. We have politicians out there who are elected to office who have failed to uphold those things in the Constitution, that have failed to uphold all the different systems that it takes to keep a community whole. There's a failure of investment in those neighborhoods where your population is greater, where you have you have so much money that comes through that community because people have jobs and people spend their money and people have done all the things they've done. They've paid their taxes and all these other things. And we've been failed on many different levels. The police have been failed. The police have been failed in letting some of those, some of those people into uniform that don't belong there. There are people who, they don't fund it properly. They fund them with military equipment, but they don't even pay these people properly. They've been failed with training. So an acknowledgement of this failure, leaves us with a unique problem. How do we deal with it? Now, we think that we're dealing with it with elections, and to a degree, we are. But what we have to understand is that dealing with this failure and correcting the mistakes of these failures is going to require an investment by everyone who cares and who doesn't want to live their life this way. In order for policing to change, we need an investment by those in power when it comes to funding, when it comes to training, when it comes to selection. We need an investment by the individual officers on how they deal with situations. We need an investment by the community itself in how we address one another and how we deal with one another. We have to be invested in each other's future and each other's well-being. We have to be invested in not taking from one another and harming one another. We have to, when we say we love someone, we have to mean it, or don't say it at all. We have to invest in how we're going to do things, and we have to invest in a total buy-in in the uplifting of our communities. When we marched in the street, every person that marched needed to register to vote. Because if every person marching had registered to vote, you could have taken everybody responsible for all the things that I just said and removed them from their job and put in some people and elevate some people that could do those things. And if they fail you, you hold them accountable as well. Because we have to, again, accountability is for everyone. Every person that walks up and down the street, every person that pulls a gun on someone else, every person that decides to rob a place so they can get a quick fix, every cop who hurts someone, every cop who feels this need to dominate somebody because their training said so, all these different things, there's an accountability to one another. And one of the reasons why our country, which is so rife with opportunity and so rife with riches, this is one of the only countries in the world where you can get anything and become anything. And the reason why the reason why we have such a dangerous country, where it's dangerous to be a minority, where it's dangerous to be a cop, where it's dangerous to own a gun, where it's dangerous to not own a gun, where there's all this danger around us, is because we're continuously failing one another. We're continuously not living up to all of those different things that we signed up for when we got a job, when we had a family, when your girlfriend turned up pregnant, when you decided to go to school, when you decided not to go to school, all those different things, when you decided to become a police officer, all those different things. And all we need to do for real is acknowledge the failure first and foremost, so that we can begin the process of healing and begin the process of dealing with what we need to deal with in order to get past it. If we don't acknowledge the failure, we continue to push on and slog on as if nothing was going on, as if nothing was wrong, as if I have my own life to live and it doesn't matter what goes on in my home. And it doesn't matter that I chose to get married, that I chose to have children, and that I chose to be a part of this system. We all are accountable. And the longer we dodge that accountability, the longer this goes on. Each one of not one of us is going to have the power to fix it on our own, but we definitely have the power in mass. So we definitely have the power in numbers. We have enough police to stand up to this stuff, it changes. We have enough legislators who are more concerned about the well-being of the community than the well-being of their campaign donations, things will change. If we have people in the neighborhood that are more concerned about their kids doing well than how much money the corner boy is making, things will change. There is no stopping that. So I would suggest that the only thing, and my last word for this today, is that if we acknowledge, our failings as a society, we can begin to live up to those successes that we were promised and those opportunities that are there waiting for us.
Yes, sir. And as always, I want to thank everybody who comes onto the YouTube and the audience, or even our members through our Facebook group page, who pay attention to a lot of conversations that we're having over the week, a lot of the postings that we actually put out to promote, ways we can actually change things within our communities. My push is only to bring, as I said, more people off our audience into our Facebook group. That way that you can get our most recent updates and things of that nature. But all we're trying to do is push for change here. All we're trying to do is create as many avenues as we can to give opportunity to change. And to create those avenues, we need more people that are actually giving their input. We need more ideas, because between the both of us, we can come up with a million, between us, but it's always best to have more heads than one, trying to fix this situation, especially when it's something that's affecting us all in a lot of different ways. And, every situation is different for every minority. It's not like, every minority just lives the same life, whether they're in the same community or not. Everybody's situation is totally different. And we've got to all come together to make this thing work the way it's supposed to. And, the system may have been set up without a lot of these things in mind that we're facing in 2021. But, the more work we put into it, we could change and alter the system to make it work for everyone the way it's supposed to. Everyone involved, law enforcement and people within the community also.